Hi, Janelle. I'm John Schaffner, and thank you very much for agreeing to talk to me today. I've been following your posts and all of your activities, and I'll say you've got a fascinating history and career. I wanted to learn more about that, and to ask you some questions about particular space stuff, if that's okay.
Absolutely. I love that you said a wonderful space career, because from my perspective, I feel like I'm just a baby in the space industry. Well, I feel like I'm just getting started, in other words.
Yeah. Well, okay. Let's go back to the beginning then, because I'd like to hear that, how it got started.
Growing up, my family was my rock, supportive in every way, shape, and form. They just allowed me to be curious about whatever I wanted. And for me, looking back, that played a huge role in just letting me approach the world in an open way and see almost anything as being a possibility. On one of these days, I came home from school. I'm in the kitchen, and on the counter is my stack of mail, and I take a look, and I'm going to throw it away. But my mom happened to be there that day, and she saw that on top of my pile was a pamphlet from a school called the Massachusetts Institute of Technology, or MIT. I had never heard of MIT before in my entire life, but my mom had. So when my mom called me to come home that spring saying there was a package waiting for me in the mail from MIT, you need to open it, she's waiting for me, and hurry up. But open. The first word says congratulations. I could not believe it. We couldn't believe it. We were like, wait, are you serious? Gotta read it again. Gotta read it 10 times. Make sure it's real. And it changed my life. That pamphlet and the fact that my mom pushed me to apply, it completely changed my life, because I went to MIT that summer. I had an incredible experience, and suddenly I went from being the type of student who had no idea what I wanted to do to at least knowing that I want to go to the school MIT.
So it sounds like you went there and you found a home. Both
Yes.
with the school, the campus, the professors, the other students, like minds. Everybody's enjoying the same challenges, right?
Yes. Yes. It was game changing.
You didn't have space as an objective at that point,
No.
right? You were
No.
still just finding your way, and said MIT, great place, I like the school. So you were more of a math person. Theoretical math was kind of your target.
Yeah. I mean, when I got to MIT, I didn't really look into all the courses and majors and careers on the other side, but I did know that I definitely thought that was cool. So going in, that was my focus.
Now, tell us a little bit about the turning point that you had, which is a fascinating story in itself, which led you to where you are today as a result of starting your first few classes and still looking for what you want to do for yourself.
Right. There were just still some professions out there that didn't exactly feel reachable. And one of them was working for NASA. So when I got to MIT, it really wasn't on my radar at all until one of my classmates or upperclassmen, they urged me, how about you just give one of the engineering majors a chance, take an intro class. And so I took their advice, and I did come across one called aerospace engineering. And, it had the word space in it.
Right.
I don't know any kid who doesn't grow up who has at least one moment in their childhood when they're looking at the stars and just thinking about, wow, like we're here in the universe and what's out there. So that word space, it kind of inspired me a little bit. And I went to that class, and on the first day, the professor's going over the syllabus. We're going to learn about rockets. We're going to learn about planes. We're also going to learn a little bit about the history of space flight. And he shows this image of an astronaut fixing the Hubble telescope. And I think it was in that moment that it really clicked to me that this was real. Like, it's not like growing up to be a princess. Like, you actually can be someone whose job it is to work in space. How cool is that? And then my professor says, as if it's the most normal thing in the world, that he is the astronaut in the picture. I think like my heart, I couldn't believe what I was hearing. But man, I was inspired in that moment that if I can be here right now, like sitting in the same room as a real life astronaut, then maybe it is possible for me to do this. And maybe it is possible for me to maybe work for NASA one day.
So then you plow through MIT and you're loving space and all things about space. How did you decide that you wanted to work at JPL?
Yeah, that was another discovery for me because growing up in New Jersey, I had never heard of JPL before. Like, what in the world is a jet propulsion lab? If you had said that to me, I wouldn't have known it had anything to do with NASA. But turns out in all of the classes I took, the professors loved to use existing companies as examples in our problems. Let's pretend we're going to land a rover on Mars like JPL, or let's pretend we're sending a probe to Jupiter like JPL. And JPL, it kept coming up all the time. And I was learning it's one of NASA's centers. They focus on space exploration, space robotics specifically. And hey, if you wanted to do something cool in this field, that was definitely a place that you wanted to be. And so I didn't need any more convincing after that. I was in line every fall for career fair at the JPL booth with my resume and everything, nervous, probably sweating a little bit. And every year that I applied for the internship, I was rejected. And I started to think about how I had come into this major knowing absolutely nothing. I couldn't tell you anything about rocketry or planes or military, nothing. But look at how far I have come. And when I changed my thought process to be like that, suddenly it was fuel. And over time, I became more confident in myself. And I guess eventually was able to convince JPL that I could help them succeed in their mission.
Yeah, I like something that I read that you said once somewhere. I don't know where you said it, but if you don't pick up your own sword in your story, then you risk not having a story of your own at all.
Yeah, I truly believe in that to this day. It's something that I always will. I always thought I was weird for being someone who was so into the technical fields, but didn't really read anything except for fiction. Everyone I knew was reading biographies and textbooks, but I'm over here reading these adventure stories. And I had no idea that it played a part in how I viewed the world and approached life in a meaningful way. I wanted to be like those heroes.
Yeah, well, you turned out to be one of those heroes. And, that caused me to think back to my childhood, what the things that I really enjoyed and liked when I was 10 and 12.
Yeah.
Those seem to be the things that are most poignant to us and point us in the direction of our life. But sometimes life gets complicated and it diverts us and we end up doing other things, and we may miss an opportunity to do the thing that's really, really contiguous and wonderful in our life. And some of these people did that 2 years ago. Nobody was going to space, right? It was NASA and Russia, and we had the ISS, 7 people or so floating around up there. Yeah, but they've been there for 20 years. We weren't really thinking about it all that much. Now everybody's going to space. So what's up with that?
I don't know. You tell me. It's like, if we have this vision to do amazing things, then what's the next step? I want to see the vision. What is the purpose? There should be purpose behind the things that we do other than let's go for fun. Because space has always been this type of place that, if you're not an astronaut, you're not going, right? But now that it seems possible that you don't necessarily have to be a NASA astronaut to go, then who gets to go next? What's the order? What's the hierarchy? And this extends beyond just access to space, beyond just getting there. This extends into other conversations too, such as colonization of other planets or our moon, and going to other places and, starting anew there. It feels, I think, to a lot of people that when you have these conversations, who is the who and who gets to go? If we really got to the point where we could colonize Mars, what would Mars look like?
This is getting to kind of the kernel of what I was interested in hearing. What is the sentiment and why?
Yeah.
SpaceX is here. And of course, it takes lots of money to build some of these resources into space. Should we view privatization, commercialization of even the early access as a means to get it built? Or is it still a problem, in perception that just people with money get to go do this early on, when in fact, that's the only way it can get done early on?
I think that one of the problems in these conversations is that you kind of have to think about the headlines that are going out too. The headline is billionaire went to space. The headline is not billionaire plans to fund a way for the common person to go to space. It feels like in the near term, at least, the end goals are not very clear. I feel like there's two buckets of commercialization as well. There's one that enables us to be able to continue our scientific explorations. For example, it only benefits places like NASA for SpaceX to do well and to iterate on their designs and make it cheaper to actually be able to send things to space. Suddenly, now the different types of missions we're able to accomplish has opened up because that cost has gone down. I think people get a little more afraid when they hear, okay, the sole purpose of what we are doing is to move people from Earth to Mars to escape the destruction of our planet. And by the way, a seat costs hundreds of millions of dollars. Good luck. It's so important that if we're talking about something as important as keeping humanity going and making sure it's done the right way, that diversity has to be in the room. We see examples every day here on Earth of what happens when there's not diversity in the room. It can happen on a small scale, but it can also happen on a very large scale. Tragedies happening here on Earth caused by something like this. And so, given the opportunity to be a pioneer in this area and to be the start of something as important as this, there has to be some serious thought put into who else gets to be in the room. Because the thing about space is that it's not just whoop-de-doo, I was up there for 30 seconds, it came back down and it was fun. It's like an amusement park ride. It's so much more than that. It's the type of thing, it's so similar to this whole idea of you've never left your hometown. So how can your thinking ever be more open? I mean, leaving your country for the first time, your city for the first time. Think about how that transforms our minds and our way of thinking. Can you imagine if the next leaders of tomorrow had the opportunity to look at our planet from up above like that, without the borders, without the differences, just as one globe, one people? That changes you. That changes you. And if we could allow people to have that kind of experience and then send them off into the world and say, can you please share? Can you share what that was like? No matter what your skill set is, if you do have the opportunity to go, you also have the opportunity to give back.
Well, I think it's more than an opportunity. I think it's a kind of a requirement. I think,
Yeah.
To have the opportunity to do that today. And yet another reason for my reaching out to you was to ask you questions about how should a private person take best use of that opportunity? What should we bring back? How would you speak to the coming private astronauts? What other great things might be important for us to think about in order to bring back, in order for either inspiration or support or things that might get overlooked otherwise here on Earth?
If you do get an opportunity like this, there is a responsibility to give back. I can relate to this on so many levels because this is how I felt when I started at NASA. I had no business getting all the way to JPL. It's a miracle that I got this far. So it would be such a shame if I did all that and decided to just keep that information to myself and not try and help the next person have a much easier time when they go at it. And I've always felt that that was a responsibility for me. If you were to have the chance to go to space like you, John, I would say that you're doing all this amazing science up there in space. You're furthering technology. You're advancing what we can do in the future. All these things are important. But in my opinion, they're only important if you are able to share them with the world. This is a huge reason why I chose to work for NASA. It was the fact that I could speak about my experience and talk about how the work we did could benefit humanity. And when I talk to kids, I genuinely mean everything that I tell them. I mean it. And I really am looking at them to show them that anybody can work in space. I don't want there to be any gatekeeping factor. Things that you absolutely can't control. The fact that your zip code is so tied to who you are going to be in life, that's crazy. We talk about gatekeeping to space, but there's so much gatekeeping happening here on Earth. We have to break down those barriers. I don't care what form that takes. For every person, it's going to be different. The message that I have, if you said the same one, John, it may be received differently depending on who your audience is. So you have to hone in on what is going to allow me to make the greatest impact for the most people. And you have to hone that skill of storytelling and being an inspiration so that you can bring as many people on for the ride the next time. So that this conversation about diversity in space, inclusion, and what will the future of humanity look like, it won't be a struggle anymore because people understand that the future includes them. There are all sorts of ways that you can give back. So finding whichever one fits in with the resources you have available to you and the vision you have in mind and the type of people you're trying to reach. That's something that we all, I think all should think about, honestly, because it applies to us all. But there's so much good that we can put into the world. There's so much good that one single person can do for the world. And I absolutely believe that for anyone who has the opportunity to do something so incredible, to go to space, it needs to be a part of their DNA as well.
Listen, I really appreciate you sharing some words with me today. You've given me some things to think about, and this is what I came here to get, some advice, and some guidance, and a good perspective from where you sit on the whole thing of space and space access. It's important that we do it correctly, and not everyone's always going to agree on everything, but we need to stop and take a check of ourselves occasionally, I believe, and be sure we're not doing something just from a selfish perspective, that there's more in it that other people can enjoy and benefit from.
Thank you for all the work that you are doing to try and spread this good and make something good out of this experience. It's amazing. And wow, I can't believe I'm talking to a future astronaut.
And I'm talking to Janelle Wellons, who a Lego character called you cool.
Oh, man.
Listen, have a good evening down there.
Thank you.
Yeah.